All right, this lesson is lesson 6.9, and it's on page 401. It's going to be problem solving using addition and subtraction of fractions and whole numbers. We're going to be doing word problems, solving word problems like everyday real world problems involving fractions and mixed numbers. So let's look at, and we're going to do a few examples, page 401 and 402, and then a couple on 403. So on page 401, unlock the problem. It says that the Diaz family is cross-country skiing the Big Three trails, which have a total length of 4 miles. Yesterday, they skied the 7/10 mile Oak Trail. Today, they skied the 3/5 mile Pine Trail. If they plan to ski all the Big Three trails, how many more miles do they have left to ski? So if we use our cubes, now I'm not going to fill all this in because it's a little bit different, and if we use our cubes, we won't need to fill all this in. We're going to circle our key numbers and units. We're going to underline our question. We're going to box in any action words, eliminate any information that we don't need, and then you're going to show your work and solve. So if we circle our key numbers and units, 4 miles, that's the total length. Now total means all the trails added together. Yesterday they skied, so they already did this, the 7/10 mile Oak Trail. So 7/10 of a mile they've already skied. And they skied the 3/5 mile Pine Trail. So 3/5 they've already skied. Underline, how many more miles do they have left to ski? Okay. So we can take the total. We need to find the difference from what they've already skied and the total miles, and that'll give us how much they have left to ski. So we can take our total 4 miles and subtract the 7/10 and the 3/5, and the difference there will give us how much is left. Or we can go ahead and add the two distances they've already skied, add the two trails together they've already skied, then subtract that from our 4, and that will give us the difference. And that's what I'm going to do on this page is I'm going to add those two distances together and then subtract. So if we read the problem, we've already done this. We need to find the distance that they have left to ski. We will use the distance they have already skied and the total distance of 4 miles. And we can start with the total and subtract each distance they've already skied to find the difference. Okay, or we can add those two they've already skied together. So over here, that's what I'm going to do. The 7/10 trail and the 3/5 trail. If we add those together, we need a common denominator, 7/10 and 3/5. Our least common multiple, or common denominator, is going to be 10. Now, we need to change both of these fractions to tenths. 7/10 is already in tenths, so we can leave it alone. 3/5 change to tenths. 5 times 2 is 10, so 3 times 2 is 6. So 3/5 is equal to 6/10. Okay, so we change that. What you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So now we can add these two distances together. 7/10 plus 6/10 equals 13/10, which is an improper fraction. So if we divide 13 by 10, because 10/10 is 1 whole, so it's 1 whole mile, and then we put our remainder over top of 10. Okay, so 13/10 is equal to 1 and 3/10. 10/10 is the whole. There's 3/10 left over. Okay, now we need to subtract that amount, that's what they've already hiked, from our total they want to hike. So 4 miles minus the 1 and 3/10 they've already hiked will give us how much is left. Now I need to regroup or rename this 4 because we have a fraction here. So 4 whole is equal to 3 and 10/10 because 10/10 make up a whole. So it's kind of like getting change for $1. We took one of those whole numbers, one of those whole miles, and just made it a fraction, okay? And that would be 10/10. because that's what our common denominator needs to be. Okay, so 3 10/10 is the same as 4 whole. So we're going to start with 3 10/10, and we're going to subtract our 1 3/10. 3 minus 1 is 2. 10/10 minus 3/10 is 7/10. So they have 2 7/10 miles left to hike. Okay. Now, we could leave these improper fractions and subtract and then figure it out at the end. If we're dealing in tenths here, we could have left 13/10, and we could have just changed our 4 whole to tenths, which would be 40/10 minus our 13/10 gives us, that should be 27/10, which would be 2 7/10. 40 minus 13 is 27 tenths. 27 divided by 10 is 2, with 7 remaining, and we put that over top of our denominator. So 2 7/10 miles left to hike. Okay. Now let's go on to page 402. And we're going to go through this one pretty quick. This is just another problem. It says as part of their study. Now remember, we're going to do this with our cubes. We're going to circle, underline, box, eliminate, and then solve. As part of their study of Native American basket weaving, Lisa's class is making wicker baskets. Lisa starts with a strip of wicker 36 inches long. From the strip, she first cuts one piece but does not know its length. So there's a key, 36 inches long. That's what she starts with. Okay, starts with. Cuts one piece but does not know its length, and then cuts a piece that is 6.5 inches long. The piece left is 7 3/4 inches long. What is the length of the first piece she cut from the strip? So that's what we want to find out. How much is that first piece? Now, if you look over on where I've shown my work, I actually drew a piece of wicker, okay? And I have them kind of labeled here. This would be from the end to here would be the first piece that she cut. Now remember, she does not know the length of that. We know our total is 36 inches. The second piece she cut was 6.5 inches, and then what was left was 7 3/4 inches. Okay, and we know the whole thing, all 3 pieces added together were 36. So what we can do is we can take what was left, the 7 3/4, add it to the length piece she knows, the 6.5. And that will give us, if we subtract from the total, we find the difference between the total and the 2 pieces. That will give us the difference, which is the first piece that she cut. So if we add these two, 6.5 plus 7 3/4, we need to change these to a common denominator. So 6.5 is going to be equal to 6 2/4 plus 3/4 is already in for us, so we can just leave it alone. 7 3/4. So now we have 6 2/4 plus 7 3/4. 6 and 7 is 13. 2/4 plus 3/4 is 5/4. Now 5/4 is an improper fraction, which means it's greater than 1. So we need to change it to a mixed number. So 5/4 is equal to 1 and 1/4. Because 4 go into 5 one time, 5 divided by 4 is 1, with 1 remaining. 4/4 make 1 whole, there's 1/4 left over. Now, if we add that 1 and 1/4 to our 13 whole that we had, we get 14 and 1/4. Okay, so the piece that she cut, or the 2 pieces that she cut and knew the length of, were 14 and 1/4 inches. Now we need to subtract that from our total length, and that will give us the length of the missing piece, or the first piece that she cut. So 36 minus 14 1/4. Now we have a fraction here, mixed number, minus from subtracted from a whole number. So we're going to regroup that whole number, 36, and make it a mixed number. Okay, so we're going to borrow, or we're going to make change, or regroup one of those whole. So now we have 35 and 4/4, because 4/4 is the same as a whole. So 35 plus 4/4 is the 36. So 35 and 4/4 minus 14 and 1/4. 35 minus 14 is 21. 4/4 minus 1/4 is 3/4. So 21 3/4 inches is the length of the first piece that she cut. 21 3/4 inches. Okay. Page 403, I'm going to do real quick. I'm going to do numbers 1 and 2, and then I'll tell you what your assignment is for lesson 6.9. This is page 403. It says that Caitlin has 4 3/4 pounds of clay. Now that's what she starts with. She uses, now remember, uses means we're subtracting, right? 1 1/10 pounds to make a cup, and another 2 pounds to make a jar. How many pounds are left? So we can add together how much she used, then subtract that from how much she started with, and that will give us how much is left. So how many pounds are left? Okay. Now, if you look on this page, we're going to add our 1 1/10 plus, which is the amount she used to make the cup, and the 2 pounds to make the jar. So if we add 1 1/10 plus 2, we get 1 plus 2 is 3 and 1/10. So she used 3 1/10. Now if we subtract that from the 4 3/4 that she started with, that will give us what is left. So she starts with 4 3/4 pounds minus the 3 1/10 that she used. Now we need a common denominator here. Okay, so we need to find the least common multiple. 4 and 10, our least common multiple is going to be 20. So we're going to change both the fractions to 20ths. So 3/4 changed to 20ths is 15 20ths. 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 1/10. 10 times 2 is 20. So 1 times 2 is 2. So 3 1/10 is equal to 3 2/20. Now we can subtract these two numbers. 4 minus 3 is 1 whole. 15 20ths minus 2 20ths is 13 20ths. So she has 1 13 20ths pounds of clay left. Now if we look at number 2, it says, what if Caitlin had used more than 2 pounds of clay to make a jar? Would the amount remaining have been more or less than your answer to number 1? Well, if it would be less, because the more you use, the less you're going to have left. So if she used more than 2 pounds, she wouldn't have as much left. The more you use, the less you have left. So your answer there would be less. Okay, now your assignment for lesson 6.9 is page 403. Go ahead and do numbers 3 and 4. Then turn to page 404, and you're going to do numbers 6 and 8. Then page 405, you're going to do numbers 2, 4, and 6. And then lastly, page 406, the lesson check and review. There are 6 problems. I would like for you to do all 6 of those problems. I'll be posting the answers later at the end of the week, so you can check your work. I hope everybody's having a good day. Work hard. You can do it. And I'll see you next time.